The Siberian mountains stood tall and unforgiving, towering pines clawed at the sky. Their dark forms were dusted with the first snows of winter. This was Alexei's world. He lived alone in a small, sturdy cabin nestled within a valley. The nearest village was a 2-day trek through treacherous paths. Alexei didn't mind the solitude. He found solace in the silence of the mountains. He felt a kinship with the wild creatures that shared his home. Alexei had lived here for as long as he could remember. He had built his life with calloused hands and a determined spirit. The mountains tested him, but they also sustained him. He knew their secrets, their moods, their unforgiving nature. He respected the power of the wilderness. He knew he was a visitor in this realm of rock, sky, and snow. The long days of summer were a distant memory now. The first whispers of winter were upon the land. The air was crisp and carried the scent of pine and damp earth. Soon the snow would fall in earnest, blanketing the mountains in a thick white silence. Alexei would be isolated, cut off from the world, but he was prepared. He had learned to live in harmony with the rhythms of nature. He knew that winter was a time for reflection, for huddling by the fire and listening to the wind howl outside. It was a time for mending tools and for dreaming of spring. Alexei was not afraid of the solitude. It was in the silence that he felt most alive, most connected to the wild heart of the mountains. The sun had barely risen when Alexei started his day. He stepped out into the cold air, his breath misting before him. The sky was just beginning to lighten, casting long shadows from the mountains. Alexei took a deep breath and savored the crisp air. It was a new day full of promise and challenges. His first task was to tend to his animals. He had a small herd of goats that provided him with milk and cheese. He also had a few chickens for eggs and a loyal dog named Boris who was his constant companion. Alexei cared for his animals with a gentle hand. He knew that they relied on him for their survival, just as he relied on them. After feeding the animals, Alexei turned his attention to his farm. He had a small plot of land where he grew vegetables during the short summer months. He had potatoes, carrots, cabbages, and other hardy crops that could withstand the harsh climate. Alexei took pride in his garden. It was a testament to his resilience and his ability to thrive in this unforgiving environment. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Alexei worked tirelessly. He chopped wood for the long winter ahead, repaired his fences, and gathered supplies. He moved with a quiet efficiency, his movements honed by years of hard work and a deep understanding of the land. Alexei knew that survival in the mountains depended on being prepared, on anticipating the needs of tomorrow. As the day began to wane, Alexei returned to his cabin. He was tired but satisfied with his day's work. He had done everything he could to prepare for the coming winter. Now, all he could do was wait. He knew that the mountains held many challenges, but he was ready to face them head-on. The wind howled like a banshee, tearing through the mountain passes. Snow fell in thick sheets, obscuring the familiar landmarks. The storm had arrived earlier than expected, catching Alexei off guard. He had seen many winters in these mountains, but this one promised to be different. This one carried the icy breath of death. Inside his small cabin, Alexei stoked the fire, his face illuminated by the dancing flames. He had been trapped inside for 3 days now, the storm showing no signs of abating. Food was running low, and the silence outside was unnerving. The storm had cut off all sound, creating an eerie, almost suffocating stillness. Even Boris, his normally boisterous dog, lay curled by the fire, whimpering softly. The isolation was starting to wear on Alexei. He was used to the solitude, but this was different. This was a forced confinement, an unwelcome guest that threatened his very existence. He missed the feel of the sun on his face, the sound of the wind in the trees, the sight of a clear blue sky. He yearned for the simple pleasures that the storm had so ruthlessly snatched away. But Alexei was a survivor. He would not be broken by a little snow and wind. He had faced hardship before, and he had emerged stronger, more resilient. He would not give in to despair. He would not let the storm extinguish the fire that burned within him. He would survive. The biting cold seeped into the cabin, despite Alexei's best efforts. The fire, though blazing fiercely, seemed to offer only a small reprieve from the relentless chill. The storm had raged for days, each hour an agonizing stretch of time. Alexei knew he had to be resourceful. His supplies were dwindling rapidly. He had to make them last. He rationed his remaining food carefully, dividing each meager portion into smaller and smaller meals. He melted snow for drinking water, adding a pinch of precious salt to stave off dehydration. Every crumb, every drop, was precious. Waste was not an option in this unforgiving battle for survival. He took stock of his remaining potatoes, his heart sinking as he realized they were almost gone. But then, an idea sparked in his mind. He wouldn't eat the last of the potatoes, instead he would use them for something more valuable. For hope. Carefully he cut the potatoes into sections, each containing a few healthy eyes. He planted these sections in a small box filled with soil he had saved from the previous summer. He would grow sprouts, a fresh source of sustenance in the bleak, frozen world outside. His days were a blur of shivering cold and gnawing hunger. But amidst the hardship, Alexei clung to hope. He tended to his potato sprouts with a devotion bordering on reverence. They represented life, growth, and the promise of a future beyond the storm. He whispered encouragement to the tiny green shoots, willing them to grow, to thrive, to defy the death grip of winter. The storm finally broke on the 7th day. An eerie silence descended upon the land, broken only by the mournful creaking of snow-laden branches. Alexei emerged from his cabin, blinking in the weak sunlight that filtered through the heavy clouds. His stomach gnawed with hunger. He knew he had to find food, and quickly. Taking his rifle, he ventured out into the pristine white world. His breath formed frosty plumes in the frigid air as he scanned the landscape. Every instinct was on high alert, honed by years of living in tune with the rhythms of nature. He noticed tracks in the snow, faint but unmistakable. They were the tracks of a rabbit, a small beacon of hope in the vast expanse of white. With Boris at his side, Alexei followed the tracks. He moved with a hunter's grace, his footsteps silent on the snow-covered ground. The thrill of the hunt, the primal instinct to provide, surged through him. It was a dance as old as time itself, the predator and the prey, locked in a battle for survival. He finally spotted the rabbit, a small brown blur against the white backdrop. He raised his rifle, his breath catching in his throat as he took aim. The shot echoed through the silent woods, a sharp crack that shattered the stillness. Boris, with a joyous bark, bounded forward to retrieve their hard-won prize. That night, back in the warmth of his cabin, Alexei ate a meager meal of rabbit stew. It wasn't much, but it was enough to stave off the worst of his hunger. As he drifted off to sleep, the warmth of the fire chasing away the lingering chill, he felt a surge of gratitude. He was alive, he had survived, and in the face of adversity, he had found the strength to persevere. The grip of winter slowly began to loosen. The days grew longer, and the sun's rays carried a hint of warmth. The snow, once pristine and all-encompassing, began to retreat, revealing the bruised but resilient earth beneath. The air, no longer biting and harsh, was filled with the sweet scent of thawing earth and the promise of new life. Spring had finally arrived in the Siberian mountains. For Alexei, spring was a time of rebirth, a chance to start anew. He emerged from his winter isolation, his face weathered but his spirit unbroken. He surveyed his small farm, his eyes taking in the familiar sights with a renewed sense of appreciation. The apple tree, bare branches reaching towards the sky, hinted at the sweet bounty to come. The patch of land he used for his vegetable garden, now a muddy expanse, awaited his touch. He set about his work with a vigor that belied the long, harsh winter. He repaired the fences that had buckled under the weight of the snow. He tilled the soil, his hands working the rich earth, preparing it for the seeds he would soon plant. He tended to his goats, their udders heavy with milk, a testament to the life-giving cycle of nature. As he worked, Alexei couldn't help but feel a sense of hope blooming within him. He had survived another winter, another test of his resilience and determination. He had faced the fury of the mountains and emerged victorious. And now, with the arrival of spring, he was ready to rebuild, to cultivate, to thrive.